Welcome to Behind the Flag Podcast, sponsored by Get It Right Enterprises. Come on, join the crew and take the field during Friday Night Lights. We will learn from experienced guest presenters and mentors that will help you become a better football official, providing the tools to put you in the correct position to make the right call. Raise your officiating knowledge and strive to become the best football official and expert in National Federation High School rules. Learn the art of film breakdown, mechanics, and philosophies. You know, every year we have an entire off season to get prepared. But in season, you only have one chance to get it right.
All right, here we go. Welcome back. Another Saturday morning behind the flag. And today we have Dusty Young from the NMAA and JP Murrieta joining us. And what a duo to have on a Saturday morning. This is going to be interesting to hear these two talk about the NMAA and high school football in the state of New Mexico. Ken?
Yeah, I know everybody gets tired of us talking rules and watching video clips, so this is kind of cool. Change it up a little bit with a couple of guys who have deep roots in New Mexico. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, so Dusty, we'll start with you. If you want to just give us a little bit of background about yourself, where you came from, how many years you worked in NMAA, kind of your responsibilities, roles.
Yeah, absolutely. First, guys, thank you so much for having us. What you all do for our state on the officiating side is awesome, and I know what you guys are doing with this show is really keeping folks engaged. So thank you guys for what you all do. For myself, I am here from New Mexico. I went to Manzano High School. I was actually a baseball player. Loved all sports, but my family's main focus was always baseball. I played baseball in Manzano, was lucky enough to go from there to UNM, play baseball at UNM, and then a few years in the minor leagues with the Florida Marlins organization. And really the only reason I am with the NMAA still today is because of our current commissioner of officials, Dana Pappas. She is actually my cousin, and I think a few people know that, but not everywhere. And she, when I came back after my last year of pro ball, I was actually still planning to go back and give that pipe dream a try, but I was looking for a part-time job. And Dana said, "Hey, we're looking for a soccer officials assigner." And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about soccer or assigning officials, but I'll give it a go if you guys are in that much of a bind." And I must have done something right because I was asked from there to stick around as an administrative assistant, and have since moved on, all the way up to where I am now as an associate director. I'm in my 16th year with the NMAA. I'm currently the director of football and baseball. Also work with activities like JROTC, chess, and esports, and really just happy to be here. And again, I love my job. I've been here for, like I said, 15 years, going on 16, and being able to work with high school athletics and work for kids in schools for officials is just such a great honor.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you and Dana were cousins. That's good to know. But 16 years, wow, that's quite a run. So
We won't hold that against you, by the way. It's okay.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should reference that or not,
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, New Mexico's a small state, and everybody knows everybody, it seems like. So JP.
Well, it's a little known fact that I'm a cousin to Dana Pappas. No, that's not really true at all. I have a different career path bringing me to the NMAA. My athletic resume isn't as accomplished as Dusty. I grew up out in Southern California, played sports in high school, but, was a 5'9", 100-0 white guy, and realized that my athletic career wasn't going far. But I wanted to find a way to stay involved in sports. And I was always involved in high school with speech and theater arts and all that sort of stuff. So I pursued a career in sports broadcasting and went to school, got a degree at Pepperdine University in telecommunications, and out of college got a job working in Farmington, New Mexico, and started my broadcasting career up at KOBF in Farmington, New Mexico. And for a guy from Southern California at the time, I didn't even know there was a place called Farmington, New Mexico, but worked up there for about 2.5 years, loved it up there in the Four Corners. After about 2.5 years, came down to Albuquerque, worked at KOB TV in Albuquerque since about the spring of '96. And just for the last couple of years, took a job with the NMAA as the sports information director. And a lot of what I did in television, doing interviews, highlights, features, sound bites, that sort of thing, I bring that skill set to the NMAA. And so I'm responsible for a lot of their material on the website and social media and dealing with the media and media credentials and that sort of thing. So it was really a seamless transition from kind of the TV world to working with the NMAA. And it just ties in well with my passion for sports and high school sports. When I was at KOB, I started up a high school show there and did that for more than 2 decades. And so I really just found a way and a different avenue to continue the passion of covering high school sports.
Yeah, I tuned into KLB one night and you weren't there. And you
All of a sudden I was gone.
Yeah, all of a sudden you're gone, and I'm like, where did JP go? And where am I going to get all my scores from now? And then you popped up here at the NMAA, which was really, really nice to see, and I'm glad that you took that position because looks like you're having a lot of fun there.
Yeah, it's great. It's a lot of fun, and you're not alone in that assumption. For the first couple months, working off of television and kind of behind the scenes at the NMAA before we started doing more stuff on the website with video and that sort of stuff, I would see people out in public and they'd ask me, hey, how's retirement? Or, you left television. What are you doing now? And so it was a lot of people had to kind of find out where I was and what I was doing.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to see that you really grabbed the hold of this role here that they hired you for, and you put out a lot of good information, a lot of funny little anecdotes there, and I get on the social media just to see what you have to say that morning, and kind of brightens up the day for people. So keep it up.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks.
I got a quick comment for JP. You put out a video last year, and I know we're going to try to talk football here, but you put out a bench decorum video about expectations and stuff, and it went to all the coaches. And Dennis and I both call basketball as well. That really helped set the table for proper behavior by the coaches and administrators and stuff like that. And as an official, I just want to tell you how much we appreciate that video you put out. I think it was last year or year before.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's really, elements like that was a big reason why Sally and Dusty brought me over to the NMAA, is to start producing a lot of video content and really kind of taking this next step for what they had already been doing with their website and things like that. So yeah, and I mean, we've taken steps from producing videos like that to producing weekly informational videos with NMAA Executive Director Sally Marquez, to even just the fun little videos that you were talking about, Dennis, on social media, to a weekly high school show that we started last year, which we were taking on the road and all around the state. So, it seems like we're taking step by step and kind of progressing in that direction. So, but I appreciate that comment. I know exactly what you're talking about, the video.
Yeah, and JP, give me what's your title again there at NMAA?
Sports Information Director is the name they put, or is the title they put underneath my name on the door. So I'll go with that.
All right. Sounds
yeah,
good.
but I've heard Dusty call him other things, so I'm not sure if that's.
Yeah, this is a G-rated podcast, right?
Yeah, it's kids rated. So I'm sure that there are some students that tune in and listen. So, um, we enjoy when they send us messages also. So we know that there's a under 18 audience, so we try to keep it clean.
Good to know.
Yeah. So Dusty, just we were talking earlier offline. Dana had sent out a commissioner's corner just last week talking about the history of the NMAA. I don't know if you could talk a little bit about the history of the high school football here. If you have anything to add to that off the top of your head, maybe a little bit of a role with your position and the head coaches in the state with football also.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when you mention, excuse me, when you mention high school sports in New Mexico, people automatically think of state basketball and the pit and how that place gets packed. What I think is lost sometimes is how big football is as well. There are some deep traditions here in New Mexico. You look at some of our schools down south, Artesia, of course, with the numerous state championships and the Bulldog Bowl that they pack every week, regardless of how well their season's going or not. And schools like Carlsbad with deep tradition as well, Las Cruces, Mayfield. I mean, the list goes on. And I think what's been exciting about football over the last few years is there are so many more teams that are competitive, and that it used to be every year you'd see Las Cruces or Mayfield or Clovis or teams from down south, they would run away with this thing. Well, now there's teams all across the state that are really competing and giving their all. And high school football is huge here now. We have over 120 schools participating. It's because of the nature of the sport, of course. You have more kids participating in football than any other sport in the state, and it's just awesome. I think what our coaches do is phenomenal. And right now I feel so bad for them. They should be getting ready for the state playoffs, which would be going on really within the next couple of weeks. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we're not in that situation right now. But I will say I've talked to so many coaches over the last 6 months, and they're still staying engaged, and they're keeping those kids, hope alive and keeping them active, and not only, workouts and lifting weights and things like that, but they're truly being there for those kids, and they're being that second parent, because right now our kids need that more than anything.
Yeah, you talk about the coaches being engaged. We did have a couple coaches come on early in the spring or early in the summer, I'm sorry. The offensive coach, I believe, from La Cueva, and then refresh my memory, Ken.
It was Clovis's defensive coordinator.
Well, we did offense and defense. So we've had 4 coaches on this show. We did offensive schemes and defensive schemes. So we reached out to 4 coaches in the state, in different parts of the state, not just in Albuquerque, but one was from, I believe, Mayfield, or was it Las Cruces? And they came on and they just talked football and what they're trying to do with their kids. And they didn't have to come on and talk to a bunch of high school football officials, but they're trying to find other avenues to reach out and to get a different perspective and to help train high school officials. So the coaches have, I think, have done a good job also this off season and the season that we're supposed to be having. So I don't know if you got any feedback, Dusty, from when we did that, but I think it was great that the coaches did come on and gave us a hand with just teaching the officials a different aspect of the game.
Yeah, and we have heard feedback that our coaches really do appreciate being involved with the Officials Association. I think over the years that kind of one-on-one relationship between coaches and officials have kind of been lost. Some of that we think stems from the fact that all of our rules clinics became online. There wasn't a whole lot of face-to-face interaction. And, obviously now with technology and Zoom and hopefully getting back to in-person meetings, we can kind of change that narrative and get coaches and officials back in the same room understanding who each other is, not only as an official or a coach, but also as a person, because I think that goes so far and such a long way in relationships and communications once that game actually does start.
Hey, JP, could you tell us a little bit about your interactions with coaches, when you were a sportscaster or, even officials?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been covering high school athletics in this state for, over 25 years now, which is hard to believe. But over that time, in covering so many programs statewide, I've had built up relationships with a lot of these longtime coaches who have been around for so long. And so making that transition to the NMAA is kind of fun that I have that opportunity to continue those relationships, because immediately when I came over to my new job, I was still contacting a lot of these coaches from programs from all over the state, and they already knew who I was, where I'd come from. And that helps in helping get our message out from the NMAA, because they know that I'm familiar with high school football in New Mexico. They know my work covering teams and covering programs. They know I'm familiar with, history of football in this state. So there's a little bit of credibility that comes with that, both from an official standpoint and from a coaching standpoint. So it's been nice, that transition and building up those relationships, because I have a lot of good relationships, much like Dusty does, I'm sure, dealing with coaches from all around the state in all different classes.
Yeah. So, when you say that, over 25 years covering high school football or high school sports, but, that brought a question to my mind. If you could just elaborate a little bit on something that has stuck out to you in over the 20 years. I'm sure there's more than one championship game or one playoff game or one Clovis Mayfield rivalry game. Just talk a little bit about the history and tradition of something that you might have seen as a sports guy out there on the field.
Yeah, you bet. Looking back on my time in covering high school football, there's probably at least 3 games I can think of that really stand out, all for various reasons. In no particular order. One is just a couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to go down with the NMAA. We were covering highlights and going statewide to cover a lot of different programs. And I went down to cover the Artesia football game season opener against Carlsbad and the big Eddy County rivalry. And I've been down to Artesia before, and the Bulldog Bowl is just unbelievable. But to see that game and that many fans show up for a high school football game in such a unique setting where the passion for football is there is just really, really fun. Not to mention it was early on in the year. Weather was fantastic. Everyone's thinking football, almost like a fall classic in week 1. So that was a lot of fun. And that unique experience really stood out. That would be one. Another one would be at the beginning of my career here in Albuquerque shooting high school sports. I think it was probably about 1996 when Highland still had Bobby Newcomb, and Highland was playing Mayfield in I believe it was the state semifinals, but that game was at Milne Stadium. It had just snowed the night before. And it was one of the rare times in Albuquerque when it snows and it hasn't melted off by noon the next day. So there was still snow surrounding the field, cold day, obviously. And the reason why that stands out is because it was the one and only time in the dozens and dozens of high school games that I've shot highlights for that I got run over. And I was about 20 yards upfield away from the play. They were coming in my direction. And the play was already dead, but one of the receivers running his route had the defender had pushed the receiver out of bounds right into me. And with a camera on my shoulder, I was completely blindsided. Literally just hit the turf so hard that people came up to me asking me if I was okay. And I was fine, bounced right back up. But my immediate instinct is, oh my gosh, I hope the camera's all right. I mean, this is a $25,000 piece of equipment at least. And fortunately, the only thing that was wrong with it was a battery pack got cracked on the back of it, but the camera was still functional and all that sort of stuff. So that game stands out because it was the one and only time I've ever been run over at a game. And the third one that stands out was...
That's when they turned the media line, right? Right after.
Yeah, or at least I learned my lesson to, stay far enough downfield. And the third one that stands out wasn't a game that I viewed in person, but we had a live report down there. Was when, and I don't know if you remember this, was when Clovis, California came to play Clovis, New Mexico. And that was a game that went right down to the wire. Two powerhouse programs, one from California, one from New Mexico. I think it was the first of the home and home series that they had set up between those two schools. And there was at least 10,000 people there to watch the game. Again, went down to the wire. And that was also the year that I remember that Clovis had a kid on their team with the ultimate football name. He was a linebacker, and his name was Kane Sweet. And I'm like, that's like the perfect high school football film name if you had to name a linebacker in a high school football movie. So I always remember that name. But those, without taking up too much time, those are a couple of the games that really stand out over all my years of covering games. But I love high school football in this state.
Yeah, where's Kane Sweet today, right?
Yeah, that I'd have to dig up a little bit. I think from Clovis, he went to Eastern New Mexico and played there, but where he is now, I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, Dusty, how much traveling do you have to do with your position? Are you on the road most of the time? I mean, not now during COVID, but generally, are you, on Friday nights, are you around the state? Or tell us a little more exactly what you do on a day-to-day.
So really in our office, the person that's on the road the most is JP, and that's because he's covering games, events, all throughout the year. So JP definitely puts a lot of the miles on. As far as going to actual games, I don't travel a whole lot for that until the state playoffs start. Regular season, if a school, requests us to go check out a game, whether that be to, I've been to JAL when they opened their new field, they did some renovations. I've been to, Bloomfield, they asked to participate in a special military night. Or sometimes we actually have to go to a game and kind of just be there to oversee if it's a heated rivalry or if the administration wants some help to have some NMA folks on site just because it's a heated rivalry. So every now and again during the regular season we'll travel for games, but not a lot, not as much as JP. During the state playoffs, do try to get to as many games as possible. Most of those will start in the early rounds, in the areas surrounding the metro area, just because it's easy to get to numerous different games. But once the semis or finals hit, then I'll start to try and travel a little bit, especially for those finals. And do you want to just kind of piggyback on something JP mentioned earlier? You guys asked him about games that stand out as a sports broadcaster. For me, I'm going to go back to what I said at the very start. New Mexico football is awesome, and part of that reason is because we're one of the unique states that still have schools playing at home sites instead of a neutral site for those state finals, and that allows communities to just get after it when they host a state championship. So it'd be hard for me to pick three, like JP did, because I've been to so many small communities across the state of New Mexico for a state football final, and those folks know how to do it. The hospitality, the whole city comes out, whether it's Animas or Artesia or Cruces or Bloomfield or Portales. It's just awesome to see how much those communities support football.
Hey, Dennis, I got another one real quick for these guys. Dennis and I pushed through, I think it was one of the executive board meetings. We're trying to get the state championships at a central location. And I know everybody's, but all the states around us do it. So have you guys, what's your opinion on that? Bringing everything into UNM Stadium, or maybe even switching down to Las Cruces every other year, start some Friday night games, some Saturday games, have everybody in one central location. Can you guys give us some feedback on that? Is that even on the table anymore?
Well, before I let Dusty answer, because Dusty will give you the answer, I will just say this is a conversation that Dusty and I have had for years and years and years and years. Even working in when I was working in television, I was wondering why it wasn't like that for the exact same reasons that you had brought up, Ken. Because I think too, there's an opportunity for it to be a big celebration of football in this state in various ways. but Dusty's done a good job explaining, why it hasn't come about in that way yet. And since then, I've had the opportunity to visit even some of these other smaller towns that have hosted state championship games, like just a year ago when we went down to Eunice for the state championship game. And I'd never been there before and saw the hospitality they have in the unique situation. So I definitely see both sides of that argument. But I just wanted to mention, this is a conversation like this that Dusty and I have had multiple times. So Dusty, take it away.
Yes, multiple times, not just with JP, but a number of media folks, coaches, ADs. I mean, it's a constant topic of conversation. And I'll be honest, on paper, it looks great to centralize the state football championships, put them in a beautiful facility like the University of New Mexico. But going back to, the reason that I mentioned earlier, our schools don't want that. We're a member-led organization. Majority of our schools still love the idea of hosting that state event. All of our other state championships are in one centralized location. This is the one football that those communities, those small communities, get to really, showcase their town, showcase what they're all about as far as supporting their high school programs. And it's because of that really we haven't made the change. Folks, I mentioned it earlier, Animas, going down to Animas, New Mexico, that's probably one of the furthest drives. That in Clayton and Jal, those are the far corners of the state, and they'll never have the opportunity to host a state playoff in basketball, or a state championship game in basketball, or track or volleyball, but they do have that chance to host state football, and that's huge for them. And when you go to those small communities and you go to one of the local restaurants and you see just the excitement that community has, it's unbelievable, and it makes you think twice and say, yeah, maybe it does make sense that we're going all across the state for these finals, even though I do also get the argument that it'd be cool to have 4 state football championships in a row at a beautiful facility like UNM.
So, we've been talking about playoffs. Can you just, for the listeners that and the officials that really don't understand what goes into picking those teams that make the playoffs, other than a record, who's hosting and why are they hosting that game at their stadium? For example, Las Lunas and I think it was Roswell last year, 2 years in a row. One was in Roswell, the next one was in Las Lunas for the championship game. But just kind of describe to us the process there, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's changed a little bit here and there over the years, but for the most part, it's really been based on a system that we use called pass history. And basically what that is, you had a great example, Las Lunas and Roswell, playing back-to-back years. If it's in the semifinals or the finals, what happens is if those two teams are matched up, if it's in Roswell year one and then the next year they happen to be matched up again, we're going to move it over to Las Lunas. And it goes back to kind of giving each community that opportunity to host a big-time playoff game. So I get the question all the time from parents especially, but also, media outlets and some coaches, well, we're the number 1 seed and all of a sudden we're traveling for the state final. How is that possible? And that's because of that past history kind of format that we've used for years and years. And what's funny about that is we actually have a document that dates back all the way to 1953 that shows every state football playoff game. So sometimes I'll have to filter through that document and I won't find a matchup for the last 30 years, but all of a sudden I find a championship game from 1968, and that's going to decide where the 2020 state football final is. So it's pretty cool. It's been great tradition, and it's something that, it is somewhat confusing, especially with seeds out there now. But at the end of the day, it keeps to give you those schools and communities the opportunity to host a big-time game.
And don't let Dusty downplay it where he says it's a document. Like you think it's just a 1-page thing. I mean, it's literally like a binder full of records, literally, of past games, like Dusty said. So that in itself is, really a historical document.
Yeah, you bring that up. I talked to a gentleman that now lives in Colorado. He worked for the NMAA I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he would keep records of football stats uh, here in New Mexico for years, and I'll send you his name, Dusty, when I dig it up. It might.
Is it Dan Ford?
I couldn't tell you. I have to look on my email system. But he even wrote a couple books about. Was it him, Dan Ford?
Yeah, that's him. That's
Okay.
him. Yep.
Yeah, and I talked to him, and he stopped writing books just because he said, everything's electronic now, I guess. And so just the history that gentleman had on New Mexico high school sports and in his couple books he had was just amazing when I was flipping through it. And I just
Yeah.
what his tie is to New Mexico, if he could just.
Well, he's just a New Mexico football historian, and just for whatever reason always has been. We actually helped him publish some of those early books that he came out with all of those football results. And what was cool about those, it wasn't just state playoffs; it was every high school football game that's ever been played that we know of. So those books were awesome. We wanted to keep helping him out as far as publishing those, but like you mentioned, nowadays to update things year after year after year, the costs behind that to actually print something are pretty high. But he does have that information electronically, which again I think is awesome that we can document every football game that's ever been played at the high school level here in New Mexico.
Yeah, it's just amazing when I was talking to him and the information he had just at the top of his head. I was like, holy cow, this guy, knows a lot about high school. And the reason why I contacted him was because I was asking him if he had anything documented on football officials in New Mexico. From championship crews, playoff crews, just the first football official in the state, anything. And he really didn't have much. He didn't have anything on officials. He just said, I just never kept track of that.
Hey, Dennis, I got to ask these guys about, since we're officials and we look up to our mentors, how about Lan Clark, you guys? You want to say a few words about Lan and New Mexico and our pride and joy?
Hold on, let Dusty answer that question first. About anything history-wise with officials, because I know Dana's trying to collect stuff now on officials that have been working. We talk about the Hall of Fame and all that stuff, but other than that, I don't think there's anything else out there other than the Mexico Hall of Fame with the 80 some or 90 some officials that are in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, so Dana's doing her best to try and dig some information up. I'll tell you really what we found in our archives, and when I say we, I really mean JP and Tyler, because they're the ones that have had to dive through all that information over the last couple of years. But we found a lot of information as far as basketball goes, and track even, but for whatever reason, not a whole lot with football, especially on the officiating side. I think really basketball might be the only sport where we have a huge database of history when it comes to officiating. But that's not to say that Dana won't find some stuff, because I know she's determined, and when she's determined to find something, she's usually pretty good at putting it together.
Yeah, I'm just anxious to see what they do come up with, because I've had that question for a couple of years, and Dan Ford didn't have much, so I'm glad she's doing it because it's part of the high school football history here, so that's one thing that shouldn't be overlooked, I believe.
I just want to piggyback real quick, Dennis, on you mentioned Dan Ford again. Those books that he put out that Dusty was talking about and you were referencing have a ton of research that are put into them. For me, being the sports information director, they're a great resource. And I've actually reached out to Dan a couple times to confirm maybe someone's name or a record or anything like that. But it's not just the playoffs. He kind of takes it year by year, season by season. And like, let's say if there's an individual who holds the record for most points scored in a game or most touchdowns scored in a game. I want to say that record belongs to Ernie Perea, maybe from Los Lunas High School. Dan has a paragraph or two about that game specifically, and he did a ton of research that went into, those games and the history of New Mexico football that went back decades and decades. So, I mean, I applaud the work that he has done because it's a great historical reference, and just a kind of fun look back on the history of high school football in New Mexico.
Yeah, and I think he's done a lot for New Mexico, for the NMAA. I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame here or not, or that's even being discussed because of the stats he's kept and the things he's done for the sport. But it's just when I saw his books, it was just amazing to me. So I thought that was a good topic to bring up to you guys. When it came back to me, because I hadn't thought about it in a couple months, but I'm glad to know that you guys in your position know about this gentleman in Colorado.
Oh yeah, we're familiar with him.
Yeah, and so
now can we talk about Land Clark?
Yeah, we have a lot of officials that moved up, that currently work in high school and Division II, Division III, Division I, and NFL. So, but I kind of want to keep this a little bit to the history of what we're talking about, and if you guys could talk a little about the All-Star North-South game and the tradition behind that game.
So what's funny about that is really I can't tell you a lot about the history of the North-South game other than it's obviously a big tradition in New Mexico and always something that folks look forward to. And it's because I think a lot of people are under the impression that the NMAA puts on that game. That's actually all done through the New Mexico High School Coaches Association. So that's something that is completely separate from us. Really, the extent of our involvement is I know Dana through the Officials Association is involved in the assignments for those games as far as the officiating crews go. But from our end, other than of course, sanctioning that event and endorsing it on behalf of the Coaches Association, there's not a whole lot of involvement from us on the NMAA side.
So it's all the coaches that pick the players, the coaches of that game, where it's held. Albuquerque, Las Cruces every other year, I believe.
Yeah, that's all. It's all on the High School Coaches Association. We actually have no input or feedback on that.
All right. Well, JP, then the ball's in your court. What's your experience covering those games in the last 20 years?
Well, it's fun because from the media side, we would cover it. The All-Star festivities when they'd roll around during the summer. And I thought it was fun because you see kind of the best of the best seniors, obviously, that cover that are playing in the game. And they for years and years it was the Dirty South against the North, and they had kind of adopted that moniker. But from a media standpoint, the one thing that's always stood out about the game is it was so, unless you knew specifically who the players were, like it was a standout senior from this program or a standout senior from this program, it was really hard to get the highlights down because at the beginning of the week, they would put each other's stickers on their helmets. So like, let's say a Kirtland Central helmet wasn't necessarily all Kirtland Central. They would have a logo from Portales and a logo from Ruidoso, they would exchange stickers with each other. And so unless you knew specifically who the player was and had a roster in hand, it was kind of tough to call out the player who was scoring the touchdown. So I know that was always kind of a tricky, fun little game that would come up every North-South football season.
Yeah, well, you couldn't miss Gentry on the field on his North-South game. The quarterback.
Well, no, the coaches, they were easy to identify for sure.
I'm talking about the quarterback that.
Yeah, Zach Gentry, yeah, for sure. Again, he's one of those ones that would stand out, literally, just by his size and stature.
6'7" or.
Well, Dennis, are you referring to like JP said, his size, stature, ability, or the fact that his pants weren't covering his knees?
Yeah.
Also true. Charlie Dotson would always joke anytime I'd go over there to cover his team when Gentry was playing. He said, we just give him the ball. If he just falls forward, we're going to get 3 yards. So he's like, just give him the ball, fall forward. Give him the ball, fall forward. So, yeah, no, he was a standout one. I talked to Zach shortly after he went to the combine and got drafted. And he's a special individual. So, it's fun to follow those guys' careers after you cover them in high school and then follow them in college, and then, keep your fingers crossed that they are able to succeed at the next level. So, that's always fun. But I didn't want to let this time go by without giving a shout out to Landon Clark, because as a pro football fan, I love football. It's my favorite sport. I love all sports, but watching it, football is my favorite. And so every Sunday I'm locked into the games, easy to be found on my couch every Sunday watching NFL football. And so when you get the opportunity to see one of New Mexico's own out there succeed, there's a lot of pride in that. And I'm sure you guys as officials do that as well. And as you'd mentioned, Ken, look to guys like that as mentors. And as a spectator, it's fun to kind of look at him from a fan's perspective, and a guy who's, spent so much time in New Mexico, meaning myself.
Yeah, and since we're name dropping a little bit, and part of the history, we can't forget Brian Urlacher and the things he did here, from Artesia to the Lobos to the Bears. And I think somebody posted a picture with him and a group of officials down last year in Artesia at a high school game. That was you? I was going to ask.
Yeah, that was actually, I was at that game. That was the game when they had retired his number at the high school and officially named the field at Lovington High School after him. So we went down there to cover the Lovington game. They were hosting Goddard that night, and it was a lot of fun festivities. We took a picture of Brian with the officials down there. Brian is such a great ambassador for football in New Mexico, both at the high school level and the collegiate level. And he's been nothing but generous with his time and money, both at Lovington High School and the University of New Mexico. There's a guy who just gives back to the community, and he recognizes that in talking with him. I talked to him for a while that night, just about, it's hard for him to believe that this is where he grew up. This is where it all started, with a guy who eventually landed in the Hall of Fame. And through research and looking up a lot of the people who have been in both the College Football Hall of Fame and the Professional Football Hall of Fame, there are only, I think the number we came up with were 110 individuals in the history of playing the game of football who are in both the College Football Hall of Fame and the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Brian Urlacher from New Mexico is one of them.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Hey, before we wrap it up tonight, guys, first of all, we really, really appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation. Do you have any questions for us, for a couple of, officials? You guys, we're kind of on an island, and Dennis and I just started this to open up communication. And, do you have any suggestions for, our podcast moving forward, or just any feedback for us?
Well, I'll tell you what, you said you have any questions, and you're talking about the history of football. I will kind of end and go out on my time with this. Every week on our website and social media, we have Trivia Tuesdays. And so you guys being officials, you've been covering New Mexico football for so long. I'll give each of you a guess. And we've had this question on probably like a year ago. But what do you believe is the oldest rivalry in high school football in New Mexico in terms of games played between these two schools?
I'm thinking Santa Fe High and maybe West Las Vegas or something, just because the cities are old.
Okay, that's a good guess. Dennis, what's your guess?
Number of games played.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say Santa Fe and Capital.
That's a good guess too. The correct answer, the oldest high school football rivalry in regards to games played, Artesia and Roswell.
Wow.
And they played, I believe the number was 109 games at this point. But
winning record.
Yeah. But that's the answer. So you can you learn something new every day. There you go.
Who has the winning record between them?
That I'm not sure. I don't have the overall record between the two.
Oh, okay.
So, sorry about that.
So
That I can probably look up. I'll see if I actually, if I refer back to Ford's book, I'm sure I can dig up the number of wins against each program.
Dusty, do you have anything else for us?
So I don't know that I have a question, but I wanted to share one more thing from my time over the last 16 years with the NMAA, and it's something that I didn't really notice my first probably 4 or 5, but Dana, actually, I was with her at a state final, and she mentioned it, and ever since then I've always kept my eyes out for it. And it's the officials of the state championship game. And when you have a crew with an official that is at his first state final, and if you watch that individual and you pay attention to him for the entire game, it's really cool to see how excited they are and to see the fact that that smile is really never off their face. So again, I know we talked a lot about history and coaches and athletes and traditions. But officials have that history too, Dennis, and you mentioned that we can't lose that. We can't forget about that part of the game. And yeah, that's something that's really cool to me. And it happens every year. We try to get those youngsters the experience, and it doesn't matter if it's a 6-man game, 8-man game, all the way up to Class 6A. If it's that first state final, it's so cool to see the excitement from those guys, because they care about their craft just as much as those kids and those coaches.
yeah, I agree with you. And so, just to wrap this up, we have a couple unanswered questions from tonight. Maybe Dan Ford can tell us where Kane Sweet is at.
Yeah.
And maybe you could talk to Erlacher and have him contact me, and we could get his perspective on his timeline from high school up to his Hall of Fame and doctoration. So, that'd be somebody I would love to talk to.
Yeah, we'd love to have him on the show. So
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of officials would like to get his. I'm sure a lot of officials would like to get his perspective on his football career. And with that, JP, Dusty, we appreciate your time that you spent with us. I'm sure Dana's happy that you agreed to do this. The officials might have more questions. If they do, I'm sure that they'll reach out to you. But with that, we appreciate it. We'll see you next Saturday, and good luck on the field.